Started. So welcome to the Build Your Basic Resume workshop with Fort Worth Public Library. My name is Luce Early and I'm a public education specialist. And I am joined today by Katie Combs, and she is our adult programming librarian with Fort Worth Public Library. We are both in adult services. And we're so glad you're here with us today. We'll let you get a little bit settled. I am screen sharing at the moment, so you can see the screen. And what I will tell you as we get started is that everything you see on the screen today will be shared with you in a file that'll be sent to you by email within the next couple of days after the completion of the webinar. So you'll have an opportunity to look at and have in your hands a file that contains all the slides and all the information that's shared here today. Again, I'm so glad you're with us. Get yourself a little bit familiar with your screen and what's available to you. You can actually type into the question and answer, and that should be located on your screen, probably at the bottom of your screen. In the question and answer, if you submit a question, we will get to that question. And Katie is here to support that Q&A, and she's going to be watching for that. So if I don't get to it, hi there, hello, Katie. So if I don't get to it as we begin, Katie was waving at us. If I don't get to it as we begin, I will address your questions. And as your questions come in, if I don't address in that moment, then we'll definitely get to them at the end of the webinar. Okay, I have plenty of time to take care of those questions. So as we get started, let's come here. Okay, let's take a look first. And if you look at the screen, I have written out, what is a resume? Well, for starters, the resume represents you and your background to an employer. Because these days, now more than ever, many of our job applications and our resumes, those are going to be processed electronically. You're going to do that online or virtually, as a lot of people say. It's not something that you're going to turn in as we used to face prior to having an interview. Okay, so what we want to do is change this approach so that we're thinking about electronic submission of a resume or your job application. And because of that, we want our resume to be maybe 1 or 2 pages in length. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to describe a lot about what that resume needs to look like. But also, before we move forward, you can either have Microsoft Word available to you, or you can have Google templates available to you. So as we're working through this process in this workshop, I'm going to begin by speaking about Microsoft Word. So listen to the information, take a little bit of notes if you want to, but don't worry if what you're going to use is going to be a Google template, okay? Because as most of you are aware, Microsoft Word applications, however it is that you access them, those are not free of cost, okay? And although the Google template does have some steps you need to take, and I'm going to walk through those with you, the Google template access, that one is free of cost. So we're going to talk about a couple of options here today as to how you're going to create that basic resume. So let's go back to our slide here as we talk more about the resume, about it being 1 to 2 pages in length. And that's really because you want to keep the attention of this potential employer. Now, some of you might have in the past submitted what we call a curriculum vitae or a CV, which is a very lengthy document. Now that one's completely different because of what it describes in length And that's not really what we're going to talk about at all today. But Katie's going to do us a favor, and she is going to put in the chat section, okay? In that chat section, she's going to insert a link, and this link that you can visit later, or you can even open up another screen now if you wanted to, but I prefer you save that for later. But the link that Katie's going to share in the chat section is going to take you later to what they call thebalancecareers.com. And that's an opportunity for you to then look at that if you need to make a little bit of a comparison between a resume and a CV. But today we're going to focus on the resume. But I do want to address that because that's a completely different document. Okay? So let's take a look. Yes, there we go. Katie has shared that link with us. So again, I will keep repeating the fact that everything you see on the screen is going to be sent to you in a file. So take notes on what I'm sharing with you, but keep in mind that that file is going to be made available to you. Okay. So here, take a look at the fact that the resume represents you to the employer. This is a resume that most likely you're going to submit electronically, okay? And that means through an electronic system is the first way you're going to be represented to that potential employer. So as you're getting your thoughts together for this resume, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay. So one thing I always like to touch on when I talk about resumes is there's one thing about when you type up a resume and it's going to be what we call a hard copy. You're going to put it through the printer and have it in your hand. That's one thing of how that resume is going to look as a hard copy, something you hold in your hand, versus what it looks like on your device, be it a computer, PC, a laptop. See, those are different. So what I want to address here, as you see on your screen that I'm sharing, is the way it's spelled, okay? So when you have your final document and you're all done, and you want to print it out as a hard copy, that's where you want to make sure that that hard copy that you're going to print out and then give to an employer during an interview, that copy, you need to have the accent marks where you see on resume. Otherwise, you're writing resume, which means to continue, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about this now. When you do a search, or you submit information electronically, you want to make sure that you don't put the accent marks, okay? Because electronically, it's almost like, I'm going to talk about it in a moment, but it's almost like there's this robot that sees your resume for the first time, not the human eyes of your potential employer, but this electronic system that's looking and searching for information within your document. That's why we want to make sure that we just put this word without any accent marks, okay? Now, also, if you're doing any searches online, okay, you're doing a search on internet, you want to type it without the accent marks, because this is how you are going to get all the results you want, all the possible best results, okay? And that's really important on that one. Okay. So now the first thing we're going to do, as I mentioned earlier, is we have two options, okay, today. One of the options is going to be using the Microsoft Word application. Some people use Microsoft Word through browser, but either way, you have to, there's going to be a cost involved. But that's okay, because this is just one of the ways we're going to describe that you can build your basic resume. So that's just the first way we're going to look at it, is using Microsoft Word. Now, I know that everyone out there probably has a different Microsoft Word version. There are so many, sometimes we can't even keep up with them. So this workshop today is built so that what you're seeing is pretty much what all the versions and all the types of Microsoft Word applications look like. Okay, yours might be a little bit different, but you should be able to follow this guide. So one of the first things we're going to do is try to bring up a template. Okay, we're going to bring up a template in Microsoft Word. All righty. And the first thing we're going to do is start the Microsoft Word application. Okay, and then you're going to go to make new document. But guess what? You're going to pretend you're going to make a new document, but as you see on your screen at the very top, what you're really going to do is search for a template. So what you're going to do is create new, but it's going to be a template. And this is how you search for it. You see that little box up at the top where I have already typed in basic resume. You notice I didn't include any accent marks. I just have basic and then resume, but for now it's resume, okay? And what I pulled up is the basic one, as you see displayed on your screen today. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. So this is what your screen should look like, okay? When you type in that basic resume and you want to pull it and you're pulling up that template in Microsoft Word, this is one of the things it's going to show you. What I want you to focus on for the moment is where it says create. That's what we're looking for. What you're going to do is say, okay, it's asking me, do I want to create a basic resume using this template? And you're going to see it in just a moment. So as you're walking through the steps after we're done with the workshop and you're using your software, you're walking through the steps. This is one of the first ones you're going to walk through. You're going to create. So that's what you're going to select. And that's what it's going to look like. So you create. Okay. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from the whole screen. I wanted you to have a chance to see what this looks like with the whole screen. But then, now you see this is what it's going to look like when you pull up that basic resume. Now I'm going to zoom in, make it a little bit. Just a moment here. All righty. Oh, give me just a moment. We'll get ourselves back there. Here we go. That's where we want to be. There, that's where we want to be. Okay, so now let's take a look at that screen. It says Carol Candidate. Well, but that's going to be you. That's going to be your name. So what I want you to do is slowly walk through this with me, okay? We're going to walk through one of these statements and descriptions. So we start out at the very top. And at the very top, we're going to provide our full name, our address, complete address, email, and contact number, okay, which would be your phone number. Here, so as I said, we're going to walk through this together. We are going to go to where it says summary statement. Summary statement. Now, this is where you're really going to need to stop and plan and think about what it is you want to say. Remember, you're speaking about yourself to your potential employer. This is going to highlight the skill you have in your particular field. So you're thinking about the job role that you want, that you're applying for, okay? But this is a summary statement about your experience, okay? Now we need to think about how long we've been in the field, okay? If you've been in the same field, but it's less than 10 years, or if you have many, many, many gaps in that time period, because we're thinking about 10 years, think about, is it the same job position that you've held, even if it was different employers, but the same job? Yet some people have been in the same position for 15 or 20 years. So you don't want to reduce it to 10 if you've been there for 15 or 20 years. But you want to think about, how long have I been in this position that I am in? Or if I look at these last 10 years, was I at one job for 6 months, another position for 2 years, and many different positions over a 10-year period? Well, you're going to need to let your employer know where you have been employed. But I think at this point, if that's your situation where you have lots of job gaps, then you might want to put a little bit more in this summary statement about your skills and abilities. For those people that have been in the same role for 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years, those people can really make that included here in this summary statement. They've been on the job holding this role for 15, 16, however many years. You want to focus in the summary statement on your skills and abilities. There's something I want to emphasize here for just a moment, and it's taking the time to write out what you want to share and then focusing on making that short, concise, short and sweet, like they say. Because remember, the entire document is hoping not to be more than 2 pages. So do like a draft of what you want to say before it's going to be your final summary statement or anything on this document. So you're really going to need to set aside some time and really think about what you want to say. It's okay to write something out or type something out lengthy, but then you need to come back and find out what you want to include and what you want to take out. Okay, so it's just going to take, that's going to be different for every individual. Okay, it's kind of like the planning stage. The next thing on the list you're going to see is skills and abilities. There's something now we need to really think about. Not only the skills and abilities that you have as an individual, but also, what is it that the job description, in this job description, what is it that they're looking for, right? So what is this employer looking for? Okay. Here we are. So what is the employer looking for? There's going to be some key words in that job description. The job description that you're applying for, there's going to be key words in there. Please take the time to carefully read through the job description of that position you're applying for. And I know sometimes we get all excited and we just want to get that resume and get it out and get this going. And you're going to get that done. But this just is the planning stage. You need to take the time to find out, I'm going to read that job description that employer provided for everyone that wants to hold this job. And I'm going to see what are some of the key things they're looking for. Okay. This is where you want to look at what they're looking for in their job description. They provided that. What is it that your own skills and abilities that you have as an individual? What is it that you have in your skill and ability that matches what they're looking for? Okay, you want to try to make those two fit together. So this is where you need to take the time when you're putting up these skills and abilities in this next section. Take the time to think about what that employer is looking for. Think about something we're going to talk about in a moment a little bit more. But we need to think about the words we're going to use. And you might think, okay, well, as long as it expresses it in a good way, why does it matter what words I use? Well, remember, electronic, this is being submitted electronically. So it is not a human being that's going to match the words of the description and the person that they're looking for with all those resume applications. It's going to be that robot, that electronic robot. So if the job description that you want says engineer or teacher or typist or construction, those are some of the words you're going to want to include in your description of yourself on your resume. You want some of those words to match electronically. And remember, please feel free, completely free to type in some questions in that Q&A that's on your screen. And we will address them, I promise. So go ahead and type in any questions you may have, okay? Even if it's something I already talked about or I haven't talked about yet, please feel free to go ahead and type in a question, okay? So here's where the next part talks a little bit about experience. We all know that's important, our experience. Well, one of the things I want you to do is think about job titles and job descriptions. And our friend Katie is going to start putting in a couple of links in the chat. And what Katie's sharing with us are some links. The first one, it's called betterteam.com, and it's just job descriptions. And then there's another one, topresume.com, and that one is job descriptions. What happens is we have an idea of what we've done in a particular job. We all think about what we may have done. Even if you've done only one job, this is your first resume, or whatever it is that your experience is, we have an idea of what we did. What we want to look for are those types of descriptions that kind of are mainstream and common ways to describe a particular job role. That's very important. So later on, when you've got all your materials together, you can visit these two websites. They're not the only ones that exist, I promise you. There's many. But I just wanted to offer you some options of where you could look online on the internet to find some job descriptions. This way it will help you create this resume and describe what you've done the way that I was explaining, where it's a little more concise, it's more polished. It's not like some of us, you might spend like 5 paragraphs describing what you've done in a particular job, and that's great. But now we need to shrink that down. We need to touch on those key words that describe what we did, or even what we're currently doing. It might be your current job role. But we want to find those common words that the employer, and remember, the electronic robot is looking for when it comes to describing a particular job. And that's where these two websites will be very helpful. They're not the only ones, but these will help you quite a bit. Again, a lot of this information, it's still going to come to you in an email and a file, and it's the same things we're looking at. I just want to get you thinking about how you sit down and you prepare to create this great resume that's going to get you the next job that you want. Some of you, it may be your first job. Some of you, it may be the same employer, but a different position. And you still have to walk through all this process of submitting a resume online, right? Okay. And there's just within these templates that we're going to look at today, there's just some standard things that are listed, like job title, company name. You have the date you started and then the date you finished, or sometimes it'll be the date you started and the date you finished. You're still in the job, so that's present, right? Okay. Here's another thing about job experience. We're thinking about job experience, but what about volunteering? There are many, many employers that are looking for that. They're looking for that in a potential employee. So consider it extremely important if you've done some volunteering, either in your profession, academic volunteering. Just kind of take note of the fact that employers also want to know if you've done some volunteer work. That does count to many employers. Now, if we're going to go a little bit lower here on the page and we look at education. As you're going through each of these steps, the other thing to keep in mind is that I know that everyone is different. Every single one of us is so different. And we all have maybe something different from the next person, the next potential candidate, the potential employee. Let's highlight those things that you have done or are doing that match the job you're looking for. Let's highlight those key things, and in a positive way, okay? And we're going to have all different levels of education across the board, all different levels of education. You just have to write this out, make a draft. Of course, you're going to make a draft. You're not going to type something in an hour and submit it. You're going to take some time. You're going to sit down and think about this. So you're going to walk through each one of these areas that we're focusing on and draft out what you want to say. Is what you want to say and how you want to describe yourself to your potential employer, because you want to be the one that gets that job. The next part here is communication. And most employers are looking for that. They're looking for someone who can communicate well or communicate well with their peers as a team. Teamwork is very important to employers. Even if it's a tiny few amount of people that are working as a team or many, many people, that's important. So you want to highlight that ability that you have. Some of you might be looking for a position or changing to look for a position that works with the public, perhaps, and that's something you want to highlight here in your communication skills area. There is another section beneath that, and keep in mind, just type in those questions. So far, I'm not seeing any questions, but feel free to type in any questions or comments on there, on your screen in the question and answer Q&A area. The next one is leadership. Some of these things, they're optional. If you find that you have not held a leadership position professionally, academically, in a faith-based institution, anything like that, if you haven't done that, that's okay. That's okay. It's just not going to be something you're going to include on your resume. That's perfectly fine. The next part is reference. It's giving references. Now, pay close attention to what the employer is looking for. Remember, that's going to be a big focus for us. Okay, we've got a question. I can actually address that right now. For today, we're not going to step into cover letters because cover letters have a completely different framework of what they're looking for. The important thing I will say, anytime you're focusing on describing yourself, the cover letter describes you and addresses what you're looking for, which is very similar to what happens in the resume. Again, I'm not going to take that angle for today, but I will tell you that's very, very important, whether it be a cover letter or a resume. Working with resume, but also in the cover letter, you need to think about what they're looking for and those key words. It's very similar. It says, this is what I've done, and I'm going to use the key words that I see in the job description that match it. Okay? So that's one important similarity between with the resume and the cover letter that you want to address. Again, with all of these experiences and summaries and statements and cover letters, you have this large amount of information that you might write out as a draft or type. You've got to condense that. Condense and focus. Focus on what they're looking for and how well you can shape what you have to say in that short amount of information that you have on there, okay? So very good. Okay, so the next thing we were gonna touch on was the references. You have two different kinds of references. You have professional references and personal references. Many employers will ask for three, to list three, but that's really going to depend on the employer. An employer might ask for two professional references and nothing else. Another employer asks for three professional references and two personal ones. It varies across the board. What I would like for you is to be always be prepared. So when you were doing your planning that I'm talking about, and all across the board, even if you haven't planned everything out yet, I would have three professional references available and ready. You have them ready. You have them written out. Not everything's current. So let's say you have three professional references. Okay. You have that person's full name, that person's current title, and where they work for right now. Because sometimes we have professional references, but we haven't talked to them in 8 years, right? So you want to make sure everything is current. You need to make sure it's current. Is that person still at that company? Do they still hold that title? And this is speaking of a professional reference. One thing that's very important, has that professional reference, have they changed their contact number? Have they changed their email? This is where everything needs to be current. So this is where you're doing your homework, so to speak. You're saying, okay, Joe Smith is my reference. I'm going to make sure all of his contact information is still correct and up to date. Because if your information is selected and they want to interview you, depending on the employer, they may start looking at those references before they ever see you in person. Okay, so all of that needs to be up to date and accurate. That's kind of like doing your homework in the background. Whether they ask for professional references, have maybe 3 of those all listed, all available, you're good to go. Maybe have a few personal references. You may or may not need them, but you have them and they're accurate. Again, that's part of your planning. Okay. So here, sometimes another thing I want to touch on quickly is that sometimes a reference is not something that you need to include all of them in a resume. Some employers in the application online, you have an application, it will give you this option. It's an option to attach other documents. So pay attention. Your employer's, the job application for that potential employer might give you the option to attach more files. Okay, just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So you may have other documents. So our friend here asked about the cover letter. Those are other documents typically that can be attached, right? So you just got to be thinking of all the things that that employer is asking of you when you apply, okay? Okay, here we go to the next screen that I'm sharing. You might think, oh, well, I just want my resume to look so very good. I just wanted to get everybody's attention and just be so not, just impress everyone. Well, there's a problem when we get into fancy fonts and somebody might say, ooh, what if I put my photo on there or something really nice? Well, here's what is happening, especially now that we're working online. They call virtual. So many things are not in person anymore, particularly now, right? What they have going is applicant tracking system. This applicant tracking system is what I was talking about. It's like a robotic resume reading. And electronically, not humanized, but electronically, it's looking for words. It's looking for those key words that I said. Look at the job description. Look at what the employer wants. What words are in those job descriptions? Include those words. Include those words. Remember I mentioned teacher, construction. It just depends. A clerk. Look for the words because that applicant tracking system is a set of electronic eyes, not human. So it's looking for certain things. But guess what? Those fancy images and all those pretty things that we might want to put on our resume, it can't read those. So what you might think, okay, so what does it want to read? Well, it wants to read very clean, polished, and basic fonts. Some of the most basic fonts are Arial, Times New Roman. When you're looking in, for right now, we're looking at Microsoft Word. We're going to go into Google templates. But those fonts, you need the plain ones. Arial is very common. One of the things we're going to do now is Katie is going to drop in another link into the chat box. And it's Resume Genius. And that talks a little bit about these applicant tracking systems. So it's some good information. Remember, we're all electronic with these submissions of these resumes and these applications. So take a few minutes after the workshop, when you're ready, take some time. You're going to get this document in an email after we're done, but take some time to visit this hyperlink, this website that talks a little bit more about how to get the applicant tracking systems to hopefully pick out your resume and your application, okay? Because that's what we want. Thank you for putting that in there for us, Katie. Okay, so now we're going to our next portion, and we're going to go ahead and go through this one. I don't want us to run out of time, but here's what I was sharing with you earlier. Again, feel free to type in any questions for us. Earlier, I was mentioning the fact that some of you aren't purchasing this service of Microsoft Word, right? That does have a cost associated with it. And I say it's a service really because if you use certain products of Microsoft Office, perhaps, then that's something you pay for yearly. Some people have this, some people do not, and that's okay. I do have another option for you. I do want to remind you that if you do visit one of our Fort Worth Public Libraries and you use one of the computers, then many times that will be available for you to use, the Microsoft Word application. But if not, you don't need to worry, because here's our other option. Google. And it's going to take a few steps, but it's not going to be any cost to you, okay? So many of you already have, if we take a look at our screen today. Take a look at this screen. So many of you already have your Gmail, your Google Mail, and you're good to go. You've had that Google Mail for the longest time. Today, I want to talk for a moment about those that don't have a Google Gmail account. Let's take a look at this. What are you going to do if you're all excited, you want to make this basic resume, you're ready to go, you don't have access to Microsoft Word, you're going to use Google, but you think, oh, wait a minute, I don't have this Google Gmail account. Well, let's walk through a couple of steps here. It's not hard, it's going to take a couple of steps. So You're going to go to Google, and the first thing you're going to do, let's pretend like many of us do Google searches all the time, every day. Well, you're going to pretend like you're going to search, but that's not what you're going to do today. If you take a look at the red arrow, it points to these 9 little dots, okay? That's a grid, okay? And for Google, that little grid, those little dots, those 9 dots, that's actually the Google Apps launcher. So it launches for you to see what Google applications are available to you. So you're going to have this handout later after we're done with the workshop. It'll come to you in an email, but I want you to walk through and take a look at this, especially those of you who do not have a Google account. Okay, that's really important. So the next thing we're going to do is, let's say we selected the Google Apps launcher, those 9 little dots, that little grid. This is what's going to show up for you. Okay, you're going to see all these choices, and you think, oh my, so what do I do first? I want to do everything. Well, for right now, since you don't have an account, you're going to go to that little icon, that image that says account. Okay, that's the first step. Now, there's 1 or 2 things are going to happen. If you go and you click and you select that little image, that icon that says account, it's going to do 1 of 2 things. It's going to allow you to create an account or just sign in if you already have one. But again, this is a focus on those that do not have an account, these first steps. So as I share the screen with you, and you take a look, there we go. So let's say I'm going to sign in, okay? I'm going to sign into my account, or I'm going to create a Google account, one or the other. Because what we're headed towards is that Google template. Remember, that's our goal. Okay. Then you're either going to create the account and walk through the steps. The screen's going to show you what you need to do. Then you're going to log in to your Google account after you've created it. I need you to walk through those steps. You're going to have this handout so that you can refer back to it if you don't already have an account. Okay. So now, okay, here we go. Let's say we're all ready. We've gotten that far. Now we need to go back to that grid with the 9 dots, the Google Apps launcher. Now that we're on this next page, and you're going to go to Docs. You're going to go to Docs. It's like a little image of a document with the Docs on it. Find it and click on it. Okay, that's what you're going to do. Find it and click on it. Okay, and this is what's going to show up for you. This is what you're going to see right here. Right here's what you're going to see. So guess what? We see right here that the resume is one of my options. This is one of my options. So I think, okay, this is what I want to do for today. Now I chose this first one. If you look beneath the word, the resume or resume word, you see where it says serif. It's just a font. But I selected that one just for the purposes of our practice today. Okay. Okay. When I selected that one, guess what it did? It brought me here. So what they've done, and I'm bringing this up on the screen because I know it looks a little bit strange, as it will be looking very strange to you if you're only doing this for the first time. They use filler text, what appears to be like Latin. But what it is that the main thing is you see at the top, it says your name. Keep in mind, you're going to be able to change this. That's why they put filler text in there, because this is something you change. Once you're in there and you're using your keyboard, you're going to be able to type in and change all of this, okay? And put the things that you need, because this is your document. Here you are. This is your template. This is going to be your document. This is going to be you typing in your basic resume. Take a look at the top, though. There's something that I circled. You've got those red circles. The circle at the top, that's my font. And on this is just a sample today. That's actually Meriwether font. Remember the font, the way the text looks, we don't want it to be fancy. We don't want it to be fancy. We want that robot electronic be able to understand what we wrote. Remember, look for one of those basic fonts, Arial, Times New Roman. Those are the ones you want to select, okay? But you're going to have a chance to change this. When you are in your Google template and you're typing, you're going to be able to change this and you're going to see that. But then again, if this is new to you, you're going to have that handout to follow. So keep in mind, it's the content. The content is what your employer is looking for. And it's the content, the words, what exactly it is you're stating on this document. That's what the first level, which is the electronic eye, is looking for. And then later, the human eyes, the employer, when it gets to the employer and they're looking at the document, they're looking for the content. They want it to be nice and neat, but they don't need fancy images and photos and those kinds of things, okay? When you look at this sample, you can see some of the options. They're different. They're different from the one in Microsoft Word. But guess what? You're going to have the handout where you can go in and type in, you can type into the Google template something very similar to what we looked at a few minutes ago in the Microsoft Word template, right? Because you can change this text to fit however you like, okay? All right. All right. One thing I want to address that's a little bit different on this template. Again, we're looking at content. Whatever things you see on this template, you could just as easily type that in to the Microsoft Word application, resume, and that document. We're looking at what words you're going to use. Remember, we said it's so important. Now more than ever. It was always important when you provided a potential employer and you handed them that hard copy, that paper document. But now more than ever, we've got a first layer to get through. We've got that applicant tracking system. That's electronic eyes first. Okay, so that's very different from the way it used to be years ago. And these things are always updating and changing. That's why it's so important to offer this workshop now, where we can share some things that have changed from the way that things were done maybe a year or two ago. If you look at the right-hand side of this particular template on this screen sharing that I'm doing on this Google template, see that it lists skills, awards, and languages. Now, if you have any ability in a foreign language, please include that. You'll need to include that. Typically, you would put speak, read, or write, or all three. Depending on your employer is whether that is somewhat important, not important, extremely important, but 9 times out of 10, it is going to be an advantage. So if you are monolingual and the English is the only language, that's perfectly fine. This is just not going to be part of your resume. But if you have any of those abilities in another language, then you would list that under languages. Everything that is an advantage is what I would want for you. Okay. And the last thing I want you to remember is the planning part. And as I'm walking through this last part, please type in any questions that you might have, maybe some things that came to your mind as we were walking through this workshop. So feel free to type in any questions. One of the things I want to share with you that's on the screen is take some time to plan. That's so important. Take some time to plan. Take the time to write it out. Take the time to really look through the job description of what you're applying for. Okay, that's just so important. Be familiar, this last little statement here, be familiar with what the employer seeks in a candidate is one of the best ways I can use to describe it. That's going to be so very important. Alrighty. And I do want to say, I'm going to pause for a moment, and as I'm thanking everyone, for browser, when you're all finished with the workshop and we're done and you exit the browser, it should take you to a survey. Okay, it's designed and that should be set up that way. It should take you to a survey. And please fill out the survey. That helps us so much with what we can offer in the future. And so if for some reason it does not show up, I will keep an eye out on the survey. And if it doesn't, then I'll remind you because you registered. So I have your current email. Also, the email that you use to register is the email where you receive that PDF document, which will have the different slides. Okay, and that's something you can make reference to. And also, I just want you to know that in the future, we're going to continue to offer not only, we're going to offer these workshops again. In your feedback on your evaluation, as the gentleman asked about the cover letter, include any of the things that you're interested in or you're interested in finding out more about. And also, again, I so appreciate your time. We thank you, Katie, for being our Q&A support here. And I'm so grateful that you took aside the time to be with us. And we're offering more and more, right, Katie? Mm-hmm. We're offering more and more to support our patrons and our customers. But one of the things that we're putting a huge emphasis on also now, among all the other things that we offer, is what people need in the job search, what people need for employment. Okay, so keep in mind that keep up with our website, our Facebook pages, our YouTube channels, keep up with Fort Worth Public Library and all the areas where we reach out. We advertise with Instagram, all these different places where we advertise, because upcoming, there's a lot of things. There's so much coming up now. In the spring, in a few months down the road, going to be presenting some workshops that focus on what we call Grow with Google. So I want you to keep in mind, those are already lined up, and those are going to be advertised very soon. And I am taking a quick look at a question. Oh, great, great. Mr. Payne is sharing that he'll be able to tailor his resume now because of the idea of taking out those very fancy fonts and then thinking about taking those job skills straight from the description that the potential employer listed. So thank you for sharing that, William. I really appreciate that, because that's something that every time we offer that Katie and I come on and offer this workshop. We're really excited. We're such a good team, but we're really excited about offering this because each time we can touch on something new and something more current, because the world is changing a lot. So we can touch on anything that we need to update for you. Also, you're going to have our contact information. Again, a lot of this is going to come to you in that email when we finish and after the webinar is done. But keep an eye out for all the different advertisements and promotions that we do on a regular basis. Particularly those of us, Katie and I, are in adult services. So all these things that have to do with serving the adult population, we're really putting a heavy focus on that and we'll expand all of that. So keep an eye out for this. Okay, so we are pretty much out of time, aren't we, Katie?
We are.
We are. Again, we're going to be keeping in touch. Keep an eye out for everything that we have going on. Again, Katie and I are adult services. There's lots and lots of things offered for adult services and youth and the many other offerings of Fort Worth Public Library. But we're kind of a team that addresses the needs of our adult population. And we're doing a lot of work together to grow that. So that's why I'm saying just keep an eye out for everything we have to offer. Okay, so I don't see anything additional, and I am going to wrap that up for us, right, Katie?
All right. Thank you so much, Luz, for presenting, and thank you guys for joining in. If you would like to see this recording later on to kind of refresh your skills, this will be posted on our YouTube page later this week. So feel free to check that out and share it with your friends. And thank you so much, Luz. Y'all have a great week and stay safe out there.
And that's very important. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for the teamwork. And we will see everyone very, very soon, okay? Yeah. So just take care of yourselves.